Please be seated. So maybe the other side of that reading is, if the Lord needs somebody, here am I, send me. If the Lord needs somebody, I'll go. Those are the words of an old spiritual, which I'm sure you've heard sung beautifully, and I won't ruin it by singing it myself. But I, a couple of years ago, took Vicentia Gabe, who is the Bishop of Lesotho, on a mini one-day civil rights pilgrimage from Atlanta, where I lived and where she had come to visit. And we started at the King Center in Atlanta, and we went to the Museum of Human Rights, and then we went to Montgomery all in one day, to the Equal Justice Initiative and the Lynching Memorial in Montgomery. And we went down to the bridge in Selma in August. And on that same day, we went to the Jonathan Daniels pilgrimage in Haynesville, Alabama, which was the focus of our little journey. Alabama in August doesn't have much to recommend itself, frankly. It's real hot in Haynesville, Alabama in August. So you stand on the blacktop in Haynesville for this pilgrimage, which is very brief because it's simply from a courtyard to a former jail to a little convenience store and back to the courtyard. I don't think it's a mile all the way around. And hundreds of Episcopalians every year go to Haynesville, Alabama to remember Jonathan Myrick Daniels. I am assuming everyone in this room knows who I'm talking about. Does anyone here know who John Daniels is? If someone doesn't raise their hand, I get to tell the story. Thank you for not raising your hand. Jonathan Daniels was a seminarian in the Episcopal Church in the early 60s from New Hampshire, a graduate of the Virginia Military Institute, the valedictorian of his class, a serious young man who, after starting some graduate work at Harvard, decides that the church is what he's called to and goes to the Episcopal Theological School in Cambridge, which is now the Episcopal Divinity School. And this is the early 60s. And he tells a beautiful story that I'll tell in detail this evening at Evensong, because it happened at Evensong, that Nancy Lawton, he writes this in his journal, had let the community know that Martin Luther King Jr. had told people to come to Selma. After that first horrible march, people were supposed to come to Selma and then come again when they marched again. The focus of the movement at the time of voting rights was in little bitty Selma, Alabama. And John Daniels says that he goes to Evensong and is singing the Magnificat as he had always done, and he heard the words, "He will strike down the mighty with his arm and lift up the lowly," and knew that he must go. And he didn't just go, he goes and is so compelled, and other students went with him, that he stays. He takes a leave from school, the community prays together with them, and they go back. And these brave families in Selma had decided, black families, to host these workers from all over the country. And the political moment was that we couldn't have too much visibility on what was happening in Alabama at the time. And so they were trying to intimidate people from coming. There were people from California that were there, people from New York, people from all over the center of the United States. And so and while John Daniels is there, kind of getting word on what he's supposed to do next, living with the Sales family, he tries to integrate the local Episcopal Church unsuccessfully, which is always good for us to remember. Unsuccessfully. He wasn't able to get that done. They weren't able to get that done. There's an action soon after that where they are working on voting rights and they're protesting their right to access to the vote, and he is arrested along with Ruby Sales and others. Robert Morris is arrested as well. And they end up in a little jail cell that in this pilgrimage you go and stand in August in Alabama. And it's really gross and hot and dank. And they were there for quite a while. And they're released in the dark. And they know that if they're released in the dark, they will probably die. And so they're trying to think of some way to stay. They can't convince the jailers to keep them in. And so they go to the corner store, which is from here to there, to buy a Coke and to make a call, to let people know they've been released so that they can come and get them. They can make a plan to keep themselves safe. But as they open the door, and I'm sure you've heard the story, right? Tom Coleman comes with a rifle and aims it directly at Ruby Sales, who's still around and has been a remarkable social justice leader in her life. And John Daniels pushes, and I've heard two versions of the story, either Ruby or the gun, like one of the two, and is shot immediately and dies. And the person who shoots him takes his gun and goes to the court, which again is not as big as this room, walks up to the courthouse and puts his gun down because he's a volunteer deputy. And when he is later tried, he is acquitted from what he has confessed to doing. So this is 1962 in Alabama. I don't know what kind of media it got at the time. I've researched that before. But today, John Daniels is in the saints book of our church. He is remembered, and he is remembered in these first weeks of August. And in Hayneville, there's a pilgrimage on one of those Saturdays. And it really has to be one of the hottest days in Alabama when you go down to do that. And they take a cross, and sometimes they take incense, and they take torches, and process that little route every year with different people from around the country, and always some alumni of the Virginia Military Institute that were there when he was there, and friends from the Episcopal Divinity School and his time there. And we remember a person who stepped into such an unknown and decided that it was worth his life. And I tell you that story today because they just did this pilgrimage yesterday. And when I took my friend Vicentia, who is the Bishop of Lesotho, Lesotho is surrounded by South Africa. She is a child of Johannesburg. She grew up in Soweto. She was young during the anti-apartheid movement. She remembers that victorious movement. She's aware of the possibility in her life because of the success of that movement. When she was standing in Alabama, what she said to me is, "What inspired us was you." She knew the story of John Lewis on that bridge. She knew the story of John Daniels. She knew our stories of that movement that had equipped them for their movement, which inspires us today to believe we can be a part of things that seem impossible. John Daniels, like the reading you just heard, was a part of things that were not complete in his lifetime. His lifetime ended because of the cruelty around him. And yet, he tells a story of hearing the Magnificat and knowing who it was that he was to be. I wonder if these readings are telling us about the truth of the world we live in, where thieves don't just steal in the night today in America, but in the day, and take people, where thieves come in the broad light of day and we don't know when they will come. When we live in a time like theirs, these are workers terrified of the owners. These are workers terrified of Herod, the king, who can take whatever he wants and does. And it says of them that they should be prepared. Your right question is, prepared for what? What could they possibly be prepared for that helps in their situation? You read, they're not servants, they are slaves. What helps them? Why be prepared? Why just hope that the master might be not as horrible as if you were awake than if you were asleep? Why? You should be confused by the text, please. If you're not, look back. It's confusing. Why? The Hebrews reading says that Abraham gets up and goes to he does not know where. It says that people go forward in the beginning of the story of Christian people, of Jewish people, of Muslim people, into unknown futures because they hear the voice of God. They are prepared. I don't know if the preparing is as interesting and concrete as putting a wick together, keep making sure that you can light a lamp. It just says to be prepared. Be awake, it even says. If your Bible could be any more political, I don't know how. Be awake, it says. Watch. Wait. Stay awake. For what? I suspect that it's just what happened to Jonathan Daniels. In this season of the beginning of August, as we approach the 15th, in many parts of the church, this is a season of preparation for the Assumption of Mary. It's a season of fasting, a season of profound discernment of who we are called to be. In the church that my father comes from, that I am baptized in, August 15th is when the Reformation happens in the Marthoma Church. And I'm sure after this season of fast with intention on the Assumption of Mary, the church decides that the church there should be accessible to people in the vernacular, that the Bible should be accessible to people in their local context, in their real lives, where it might mean something to them about the lives that they live. And so this movement begins because the Bible is translated and given to the people, and a liturgy given to the people in Malayalam. In our story, it is the same in English. It is given to the people, probably not with an intention to create the revolution, but that's actually what it does, doesn't it? If you give the text to the people, if you give the power of prayer to the people, God is heard by the people. That's what happens to John Daniels. He had sung the Magnificat many times. You can hear the dryness in his writing that he is singing it, maybe not with the most enthusiasm, that Sunday evening. And then the words break through, that he will be part of the work of God, casting down those in high places and lifting up those in low places, when there is no logical end to the thing that he's about to do. There is no actual result of the thing. There's no way to make that work, to just go live with that family and fight with them, resist with them for their right to vote. It was utterly illogical, like Abraham packing up his tents and squaring his face towards a promise, what we are told, a promise. This is the life of faith. And the contrast to the life of faith is everything in our daily life. Everything. The people are not foolish for falling asleep. They fall asleep because they're tired, because it's night. The people are not foolish for trying to secure their food and their safety and look after themselves. No one will do it for you in this world. We know that. They are not foolish. I think the text is telling us there is also something else, something greater that binds us to one another, to the suffering of the world, which is also where the hope of the world is with us. And so in this season, as we prepare for the Assumption of Mary, whether you celebrate or not, I do, we wait awake, that there are thieves among us. There is threat all around, as there was in the time of Jesus, as there was in the time of Abraham. Our call is to listen and to discern through these words in the language of our hearts, where God calls us, especially the improbable places that your God calls you, where you cannot see the end, but you might know that you should take that first step. And always we do it together better when we can do that together. Amen.